Hello, my name's Ian Lindsay. I'm from Edge Hill University and I'm part of the research team on the Leverhulme research project into sustainable development in African sports. The presentation here is mainly for the purposes of being shown at two stakeholders forums that will be held in Ghana at the end of 2012. But I realise that a number of other people might be interested and have access to watch this presentation at a later date. The presentation that I will do today is about international donor perspectives on sustainability in African sport for development. It's based on an aspect of the research that I have contributed to the overall project recently, in which we undertook 8 interviews with a range of different international donors who contribute to sport and development programs in both Ghana and Tanzania by providing funding and support over a certain period. The donors that we interviewed were based in a number of countries, in the UK, other European countries, as well as some in South Africa as well. They covered a range of different types of organisations, governmental agencies, international non-governmental organisations and small charities as well. So hopefully the interviews captured a range of different perspectives from different types of organisations on the issue of sustainability. To a certain extent there was a common view about what sustainability meant to these international donors. We were asking them about what they believe sustainability should be, and this common view was around, and we have a quote here, a partner who can continue to do this work effectively for the future. So these international donors would support in the main a project with finance and other resources for a limited period of time, and when their support for the project would end, they would hope that their in-country partners in either Ghana or Tanzania will be able to continue some of that work into the future beyond the support from the international donor. Within this broad aim for sustainability, there was 2 main themes about what the international donors wanted to do to achieve sustainability. The first theme was about capacity building, trying to build the capacity of individuals and organisations in country so that they could continue with the work in some way after the international donor was no longer involved. And there was different aspects to this. The main aspect to capacity building was about training sport leaders, often young sport leaders, to be able to deliver sport sessions in the future. And this approach was very much based on the international donors bringing their northern knowledge about sport and training of sport leaders and using that to try and enhance the capacity in country. A more limited aspect of capacity building was about actually trying to develop organisations in Ghana and Tanzania, providing support for project planning or accessing future funding or those kind of managerial tasks. But that wasn't necessarily where the international donors' expertise lay. Most of these international donors are sports organisations, and so there was less focus on the organisational development aspect of capacity building. The second main theme to achieving sustainability was to try and acquire further funding for the work beyond the period in which the international donor was involved. And this was a common theme across all of the interviews, even though it was recognised by these international donors that actually finding further funding from countries, sources in country, in Ghana or Tanzania, was incredibly challenging given the kind of context in these countries. And yet still it was an aim pursued by the international donors. One exception to this was some of the charities that we interviewed, who actually were well placed to actually source further funding from their own countries in the global north so that they could continue to support the organisations they work with in Ghana and Tanzania for a longer period. Although there were some concerns about possible kind of enhancing dependency if funding was provided on an indefinite basis with no end point. From the analysis of the interview findings, there was two main themes which had less focus on in the views of the international donors. The first one was about sustaining individual benefits, the benefits for the individuals involved in the programme and the benefits they may get from involvement in the programme. Interviews did recognise that they were developing the capacity building activities, they were developing a lot of young trained leaders, but were concerned that, especially after the international support was withdrawn, where those young leaders would continue to use those skills, or whether those young in sport, or whether those young leaders could actually have a pathway from what they had learned, maybe into employment or further opportunities for them. They recognised, the international donors recognised this as a problem, but it wasn't yet something that they were addressing in any real depth. The other aspect of individual benefits could be for the participants in sports opportunities. And this was something that international donors didn't mention very much at all. They didn't mention about whether they felt that the individual participants could continue, or any efforts to help the individual participants continue to participate in sport, perhaps as they grew older, or that the benefits, how the benefits that they got might be continued and sustained in the longer term. Another theme which was less addressed in the first two was around broader institutional change. Not just within individual organisations, but within a broader context of the programme itself. Where international donors thought that they could make a difference was trying to encourage links between different organisations that were involved in sport for development in Ghana and Tanzania. But other aspects of what we would classify as institutional change, they were less sure about whether they had the capacity or should be trying to make a difference in that area. For example, some spoke about trying to the potential for changing attitudes to gender, but were concerned about whether that was something that they should be trying to do as an international donor. Others, in terms of changing the policy priorities for sport, some organisations just felt that they weren't of a size or a scale or capacity really to influence the broader policy agenda. In terms of the general approaches to sustainability, we've got an arrow up there that suggests over this slide and the next slide that within the programmes that these international donors supported, what they saw in order to achieve some form of sustainability was the need for a change in responsibility over time, from the start of the programme to the end of the programme as it ran. In the early stages, the Northern international donors felt that they could influence the project or programme in certain ways to try and heighten the chances of increasing sustainability. So, for example, when the programme was initially conceived, they felt that one of the important aspects was selecting organisations and partners in Ghana and Tanzania that were sustainable themselves as organisations and had the best chance of sustaining the programme in the longer term. The planning approaches in the early stages of programmes were often quite northern orientated, as they were described by the international donors. And there was what we could suggest perhaps contradictory desires about what needed to be included in these planning approaches or the direction of these planning approaches in order to heighten the chances of sustainability. In one sense, the interviewees emphasised the need to start something new, to plant a seed, to start a pilot project perhaps, and hope that that was continued in the longer term. And doing something new, filling in gaps in existing provision would be a strength in doing so. On the other side of the coin, they also saw the importance of developing programs that complemented the existing in-country priorities, again to enhance the chances of future sustainability. But there may be some kind of contradiction there between trying to do something new while also trying to fit in with what is existing in country. As the programs continued, the international donors saw the need to pass greater and greater responsibility for the programs, but also particularly for sustainability, onto the southern partners and the partners in Ghana and Tanzania that they were working with. They recognised that it was very important that the programs themselves made a positive impact and were seen to make a positive impact, as that they felt would hopefully encourage greater kind of local ownership and commitment to the program, something that was obviously important to sustainability if these organisations and in-country individuals were to take responsibility for the program into the future. The interviews also spoke about needing at least some further funding required to continue. Even if they were working off a model of capacity building, there was some funding required to support those individuals and organisations whose capacity had been built in the future. And the ethos very much was about mostly trying to find in-country forms of funding to do so. Potentially through diversification of funding sources. Interviews recognised that trying to go to a variety of sources for funding rather than just one funding source was potentially more likely to have success in getting that. But they also recognised challenges for the in-country organisations in trying to do so. It required great amount of time for the in-country organisations to be able to put together funding bids and go and look for additional funding. But also for some organisations, and especially smaller organisations whose skills were mainly perhaps about sporting objectives in country, it required a completely different set of skills from these Ghanaian and Tanzanian organisations to actually do the work needed to try and get more funding. And this was something that wasn't particularly addressed, for example, as I've said before, in capacity building efforts. That's the conclusion to my presentation. I haven't got any concluding slides, because what I've tried to do here is just present an analysis of the information that the northern international donors spoke about in their interviews. I think it's for the people watching and seeing this presentation to consider what some of the implications of what these findings are. Hopefully they are of interest to you and maybe promote some further discussion, thoughts and perhaps way forward to enhance sustainability in programs, sport for development programs in the future. Thank you very much for listening.